Hello, everyone. I've been asked quite a bit lately about the male brain, female brain, transgender brain, what's happening with that, and what will happen sometimes is someone will email one of our trainers or ask one of our trainers or myself and say, well, but I heard somewhere that there is no male and female brain anymore because there's a transgender brain. So things can get sort of confused. So I'm gonna talk about the five different pieces of this so we can help keep them separate because they really need to be kept separate and understood that way. They're not all really one thing. And also, just to remind folks, that there's a lot at stake with this. I mean, certainly for advocacy reasons, people have been arguing, there's no male, female, etc., for advocacy reasons, and I totally understand it. But it's untrue, and ultimately it backfires, and we get more and more systemic failure. And part of what we've been battling over the last 30 years is the systemic failure that grew from the androgyny movement. And the androgyny movement was a pretty neat movement. I was part of it as a youngster. It was a pretty neat thing to expand your sense of gender, which is a social construct. But it doesn't alter that the male and the female brain are different. And if we conflate the two, then we end up with systemic failure. We end up with schools that all the way back from birth into preschool, all the way through elementary, all the way through even college, that simply don't understand, especially guys, and don't understand how they learn. And we end up with workplaces that don't understand how the female brain works and really doesn't support recruitment, retention, advancement of women in various workplaces, not understanding the female brain thinks differently, has different assets, and they're great assets. So we don't want the systemic failure to now recirculate because we're trying to advocate for a specific group. We can do both. We can advocate for that group while understanding that male-female is a human baseline. And in fact, a second important point to make in your own advocacy and your own work is that there are very few things more important than male-female on the brain. If you think about it, there are 4 or 5 primary influences on the development of your child. One is certainly the child's genome, the whole genome package. 2 is male-female, so the XY chromosomes. Those inside the package are deeply influential of how that child learns, grows, understands the world, couples, raises the next generation, works, etc. That XY is what presets the brain in utero for male and female, and this is true worldwide. Everyone, even groups we're advocating for, have male and female brains. So I would put that as one of the top 5. The XY, and others would obviously be family influence, parental influence, and then institutional influence, which would include schools. These are in sort of the top 5 of what makes your child and makes you. So that's why these are so important. So the 5 things to really look at when we are trying to take apart what's going on with this is, number 1, anatomy. Yes, your anatomy, you're going to see a lot from your anatomy, obviously, your reproductive organs. So that's one category. That's one category of male-female. The second category, the really important and hidden one here, is male-female brain, because your anatomy and your genomic package in XY all flood you with chemistry while you're a fetus, and you end up with a male and a female brain. And you come out with a male and a female brain. And in my other work, of course, I've talked quite a bit about this, as have others, and shown how this happens in utero. So every child does come out boy and girl. Every child comes out boy and girl. And that's really important to note. No matter who we're advocating for, they are still boy and girl. They are still male and female. Gender fluidity, which I'll get to in a moment, is about social construct. Your brain is still male and female. And there is a broad spectrum for what is male and female, no doubt. But the brain, we can scan it. It is male and female. So that's number 2, male and female brain. And that's the part that shows up in the Boys and Girls Learn Differently work and the Minds of Boys and Girls work, and all the work we're doing in schools and in communities to help people understand male and female brains, so we can create systems that work for boys and for girls. And we know from 30 years of research that if we don't teach ourselves, teach teachers, teach parents, teach counselors about male and female brain, huge mistakes get made, and we hemorrhage millions and millions of children out of school systems. In school systems, it's especially boys who are not understood, but in other systems, especially STEM, it can be girls. So that male-female brain piece is huge. The third thing is transgender. So there is a transgender brain, and really we should call it a transsexual brain because it's sex on the brain. The research is in Saving Our Sons and the Minds of Girls, and you can go to the endnotes and you'll find the primary studies that show the transgender brain. So a number of brain centers we can now see are operating as a transgender, so transsexual. So in other words, if you're a female to male, your body is female, but you can sense that your own brain is male. You have a number of centers in your brain that are operating male. And if you're male to female, again, the counterpoint to that, your body is male, your anatomy is male, but you have a number of brain centers that are operating female. And so you sense that you're female. And you need to wait till puberty and beyond puberty to really understand whether that's what this is. But it's scannable now. And again, the primary studies are all over the world, and you'll find them in those books and in the endnotes. So that's 3. 4 would be sexual orientation. Sexual orientation happens in a specific part of the brain. All brains are still male and female, but a specific part of the brain, the sexually dimorphic nucleus in the anterior hypothalamus, that part of the brain handles sexual orientation. That is different in a gay, lesbian, or bisexual. So 5 to 10% of humans and mammals are gay, lesbian, bisexual, have a homosexual orientation, or we call it a same-sex orientation, 5 to 10%. So their brains, however, are still male and female. We can still scan them and see that they're male and female. So again, no change in the basic, profound human baseline of male and female in the brain. It's just that sexual orientation is homosexual or same-sex. And then the 5th category to think about in your meetings is gender fluidity. Now, gender is a social construct. So gender is not sex, it's gender. It's a social construct. So when you hear it, then you're talking about how you construct yourself and your sense of identity on the spectrum of what is male and female and what you're feeling at a given time. And I think the reason the gender fluidity movement is so big among young people, teenagers, early 20s, college age, et cetera, is the very same thing that we were so into androgyny, 35, 40 years ago, because it's such a neat concept to expand out and say, I can be anything, and I want to think about anything. I want more masculine in me. I want more feminine in me. That's gender fluidity. It doesn't change that you have male and female brains, but it's a really neat psychosocial approach. The issue arises, however, when that social construct gets conflated with sex on the brain, so that people will say, well, we just choose our gender, so, who cares about setting up classrooms that fit the male brain? There is no male brain, right? That's the issue. Then we go to another cycle of systemic failure, where when we look at our test scores, we can see our boys are failing here, or our girls are failing here. Our behavior, our boys are failing, our girls are failing. The grades, boys are getting 70% of the D's and F's. We have systemic failure when we conflate these two. And the interesting thing is that we can advocate for every one of the social groups we're advocating for without creating the lie that there is no male and female. We've proven that by advocating for vulnerable populations using science. And I think I'll end with the fact that I think what's happening in the popular press is they're turning away from science, and they're kind of entertaining us with the concept that there is no male-female. Not maliciously. The intention is to advocate for transsexual or transgender, advocate for LGBT, but it's the wrong move, because actually, if all of sex and gender is a choice, then we can't really advocate for these groups, because ultimately those who are in opposition to certain groups will say, well, it's a choice, you made the wrong choice, we're not going to advocate for you. But in fact, since it's a part of the brain, it's a part of who we are, I think it's better advocacy. So I think science works better on all fronts, and also for advocacy. So check this research out, and I hope you'll go into your communities, and in your discussions, you'll say, okay, hold on, let's stop for a moment and understand that these are different things. Sex in the body, sex in the brain, transsexual or transgender, which is a specific kind of brain, which is there aren't many, but it's an important population. So it might be 2 or 3% maybe are transgender of human beings. Then homosexuality, 5 to 10%, and then gender fluidity, an experimental sense of what the social contract of gender is. Those are all separate, need to be handled separately, and in our grants and in our work, in our professional development, all of this, we don't want to forget that one of the most profound influences on human development, on human learning, on love and life, is the sex on the brain. Thanks.